Well, it looks like we have Nancy on here, and I won't be able to get into it, but this goes along with it, and she can explain a lot of this, what's in here now anyway. So let me see if I can push the right button this morning. Hello, Nancy. You're on with the captain. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Ken.
Hey, how are we doing today? How are we doing?
Very well. It's a lot earlier in Alaska, but it's a pleasure to talk with you this morning.
Well, I'm glad you got up early and you stopped me from blasting off into Deep Space Nine, which I'm pretty sure once we discuss your article here, I'm going to end up being
looking forward to that.
But before we get going, I want the audience, and there was already one question in there, and I'm going to look in the chat room to see if there's any more questions. But before we get going, tell us a little bit about yourself, what kind of work you do, how you got involved in this, and then I want to cover the protest that happened yesterday, because I've got a few sound bites. I do believe it's your fiance that gave some speech, and I've got his. And then I want to get into your article of America's Sweetheart. And I have posted that link in the chat room. I've already had one of them that has already read the article. Because there are a lot of things that we've got to hit on that are very important. So briefly, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can begin our attack.
Okay, try to do this briefly. All right, so if you go back to 1998, I was a professional recording artist and a housewife with 3 children in New Hampshire. And I was going through a very difficult time, and unfortunately a divorce was imminent for me. And I was given an antidepressant, and I had an adverse reaction to it, and I was told that there was no such thing as an adverse reaction to it, and that that had unmasked my bipolar disorder. And then I went through 30 hospitalizations for so-called mental illness, which was, in my case, nothing more than adverse drug reactions. And I was eventually electroshocked. I fled to North Carolina, where in 2008 I began to seriously do some research because I had supported my first husband through medical school, and so I have a science background. And what I discovered was that psychiatry is, in fact, a pseudoscience, which is not to say that distress and emotional distress in extreme states are not real. I'm not in any way saying that. But as far as the science goes, there is no there. And
right.
So as I researched and I became angrier and shocked. I mean, I had no idea that this could be happening in my country, and I wound up
much less
finding myself unwelcome in North Carolina, and I came to Alaska where Jim Gottstein operates the Law Project for Psychiatric Rights, and I've been Director of Public Education and Volunteer Coordinator for over 3 years now, working 7 days a week, because you would not believe how many people call us. You would not believe. Well, I'm saying people who are reading my article now, the reason that I'm working on this case is because this case is so far from unusual, and most people don't understand this. So that's me.
Well, I think the reason why people shun this kind of stuff is because not only is it just outrageous, but it's very difficult for the mind to process this kind of evil, and they don't want to accept it as reality. And I know it's difficult.
Yes, and many people, yeah, I agree with you. It's true. It's true. And of course,
the media flat refuses to cover it because it might make somebody on their side, whatever that means, look bad. And if they look bad, then these reporters think that they look bad because they supported these people, which is stupid. Look, if you're doing something wrong, it doesn't matter who you are. Even if it's your mother. If your mother's doing something wrong and doing something bad, it's not only your right, but it's your responsibility and your duty to tell her, Mom, you're doing something bad. You're doing something wrong. I don't understand why people are afraid to do that. That kind of stuff is very hard for my mind to process, much less this.
Mine
this
too.
You know, I mean, yeah. I just don't get it. Now, in the protest yesterday, I seen some pictures. A lot of people sent me all kinds of stuff, and I got up this morning. My Facebook account was loaded with stuff. It looks like it was a very, very big success. I've got Jim Gottstein, which is your fiance. I've got some of his speeches here, and I want to cover this. Now, I was going to get into this article. I think it was from the from the Oath Keepers. Have you heard of them?
I have heard of them.
Okay. Well, they're a
recently.
they're a group of professionals. Police officers, firemen. I'm not sure if there's any medical professionals, but there really should be. And and it's sad that you have to take an oath that you won't violate the Constitution. Which it's just mind-boggling that you won't violate somebody's rights. You won't torture them. That's just absolutely, again, that part, my mind can't process that. But let's get into this DSM 5, and the first clip that I have to play covers that. But I want you to explain to the listeners what DSM 5 is before we play this clip, so they have a better understanding of this.
Okay, so to do that, I want to explain that I was a psychotherapist in graduate school in Boston at Tufts, as a matter of fact. And that was in 1979, 1980. And at that time, what we had was
I don't mean to interrupt, but do you have to have a medical degree for that? Did you have to have
I don't. I did 3 semesters of graduate work. I have a bachelor's in psychology and 3 semesters of graduate work and an internship at a residential treatment center for adolescents in Wakefield, Massachusetts.
Well, because I know there's a difference. Like psychiatrists, you have to have an actual MD. You have to be an actual medical doctor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But a therapist, you don't need to have the MD degree. Well, okay.
That's true. That's true. But so let's talk about what the DSM is. The DSM is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Disorders. So to understand this, you have to understand that when I was a graduate student in counseling, the DSM-3 was maybe about 50 pages long. Homosexuality had recently been demoted from being a mental illness. And so you have these disorders are not based on science, and even in the DSM, the Bible of Psychiatry, it says very clearly that it is not validated by science. Nonetheless, the American public has been sold the notion that these are backed by science. They're not. So the DSM-3 was a small little volume, and at that time there was no such thing as childhood bipolar disorder, ADHD, any of that. In fact, if you had children up to the age of 18 were considered severely emotionally disturbed, and that was the extent of how you could label them, and they were not drugged. Over the years, the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry have become evil twins, inextricably entwined, and in order to sell these drugs, the number of mental disorders grows and grows and grows, and the enormous controversy over the DSM-5 has to do with some of the things inside it, like declaring that over 2 weeks of grieving for the death of a loved one is a mental illness.
I know, I read that, and I don't understand that.
Working on keeping in touch with your friends on the computer is a mental illness. But it's that creep. It's this every time they vote these things in and out. They vote them. This is about money. Follow the money. You asked me why the mainstream isn't covering this. The mainstream isn't covering this because of the pharmaceutical industry. You can't talk about the drugs on the radio on mainstream. I went to junior high school with the executive producer of 60 Minutes, and they did a segment on mental illness called Imminent Danger, and it was so filled with inaccuracies because the fact is that it's the general the population of people diagnosed with mental illnesses are so far less inclined to commit acts of violence that this is just fraud. And so an organization that I work for, also called the International Society for Ethical Psychiatry and Psychology, they wrote a white paper correcting every single inaccuracy, and I was able to get that document to Jeffrey Fager, executive producer of 60 Minutes, and there was no reply, and they never retracted a thing. And that's where we are.
Well, when you mentioned something about, the pharmaceutical industry and the mainstream media, well, if you look at the evening news is sponsored by one drug after another. That's all the commercials that they have is one drug after another. So obviously the evening news isn't going to cover anything with that pharmaceutical industry because they're making money off of them. They're making money.
Let's be honest. Okay, and let's be honest, it's not just the pharmaceutical industry. Do you have a 401k plan?
No.
Okay, well, I do. And the pharmaceutical share of our gross national product is huge. So we're all invested in this. This is a big part of our economy. So it's just not so simple as to blame because we're all involved in this.
Well, it's a big web, and that's why it's so difficult to really, to get anybody to get involved in it, except for the American people, which aren't in that web. And it's going to be very difficult.
It's time for American heroes. It's time for individual people to take up the responsibility that we have as citizens. And yes, and just like you're doing, Ken, just like I'm doing, just like many of your listeners are doing, it's up to us.
Well, we're the only ones that, we allow, I'm a firm believer in we were lazy and allowed this to go on. It's not like we were lazy, but we didn't know any of this was going on, and now all of a sudden we've woken up. We've got 24-hour news, we've got internet, we've got all this stuff coming and going, and now we're starting to learn. And it's very difficult for people to fight all the fights that need to be fought. I mean, this is just one huge fight, but there are several other huge fights out there. It's almost impossible, but we still got to keep fighting no matter what. We got to keep at it.
And we have to pick our battles. We have to pick our battles, and that's why I'm here in Alaska working for the Law Project for Psychiatric Rights, because in my personal opinion, psychiatry is really truly the enemy of democracy.
I have been complaining about psychiatry since the beginning I started the show. Now, look, there is some psychology that is real, but not all of it is. Look, and when they give this, another thing, when they give this cockamamie ADHD or whatever the hell it is, or the attention deficit disorder, okay, you're a child. You're supposed to have an attention deficit disorder. That's what makes you a child. That makes you normal. My God.
Especially if you're a boy.
Exactly. I mean, look, when your children are developing, they're finding out their own independence. They're going to be rebellious. They're going to be this. They're going to be. That's not a mental disorder. That's normal. It's the ones that don't have that. That's the ones that you got to be careful with. That's the ones that's going to get a gun and start shooting up a school. Those are the ones that you got to watch out for. I don't understand.
Except once you put the kids on the drugs, then all bets are off on the violence. I mean, look at the school shooters. If you look at one of the things I've spent the last few years doing is studying the drugs, and people need to understand how drugs work. You can't trust your doctor anymore. Your doctor's too busy. No matter how much you like your doctor or love your doctor is overwhelmed, and your doctor is prescribing drugs that are not well understood. We all have to be experts. These SSRIs, these antidepressants, they increase serotonin. Well, there's no such thing as a serotonin deficiency. No one's ever discovered that. No one's ever discovered any link between serotonin and suicide or depression. Yet these drugs are sold. Well, what do these drugs really do? Well, I'll tell you. If you shoot serotonin into a rat, it will attack something.
Well,
that's what happens. The most dangerous times, what is exactly is serotonin? Your brain is like a soup. There are over 200 what we call neurotransmitters that conduct the business of the central nervous system through synapses and electricity. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. The American public has been sold the notion that serotonin can be out of balance and people get depressed. It's just not true.
Well, who doesn't get depressed? It's part of being human. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody gets depressed at one point. You have to.
Yes, they do.
You cannot go through life without getting depressed at one point. I'm sorry, you can't do it. You can't do it.
But isn't that inconvenient for the corporate wheel, the corporate machine? How inconvenient that is. How inconvenient it is for teachers who are supposed to turn out the corporate workers to have fidgety children in their classroom who are not interested in what they consider to be irrelevant. This is about disturbing people and people who feel disturbed, and it's about a culture that no longer has tolerance for humane and differences and choices. This is all about the corporate culture.
Well, it's again, you're right, corporate. It's all about the Benjamins and these doctors. If they get kickbacks, if they prescribe these particular drugs, like I said, there's a new drug on the market, and they give them like little bonuses. You get a little kickback the more that you give these drugs out. So of course, a doctor's got an incentive. Oh, I'm going to get a couple extra bucks on the deal for prescribing this drug. Okay, well, you need this drug. You need this drug. You need this drug. Well, I mean, drugs are fine and dandy, but they're not the answer to everything. I don't like taking drugs.
But that's Western medicine, Ken. Western medicine is all about fix the symptoms, ignore the root cause. So, yeah, so let's get back to serotonin for a minute. Most people think that serotonin is the brain. Only 3% of it is in the brain. 97% of serotonin is in the gut. It's all over your body. If someone wanted to do a blood test to check serotonin, they could do it in their own kitchen if they were careful. It's it's all over your body. So when you take a drug that works on serotonin, you can expect certain things, your gut to get messed up. So typically people start taking antidepressants, they get irritable bowel syndrome. But yet, as you pointed out, psychiatry is the pathologization of human life. But one of the, as angry as we can get, and I've been angry for a very long time, but as time goes on, I understand that there's a silver lining to this despair that many of us are feeling and rage, and that is that with taking responsibility, we can take control of our lives. We can take better care of ourselves. We can, through diet and nutrition and keeping our relationships connected, because mental illness, what we call mental illness, is really the breakdown of connectedness. And that's what's happening in our society. Families are being broken down. And let's get back to Justina Pelletier, because this is why I'm focused on this case and have been for months now. And I want to tell you, what the media is not covering is the fact that over 40,000 people are on Facebook organizing for Justina.
Wow, I didn't know it was
over 40,000 people. That's just on one site. That's just on one Facebook site. Over 40,000 people.
Well, I know I'm
from
one of them.
Every possible walk of life, completely bipartisan, multi-partisan, cross-religious, and people are working together. And this is the big story for me. Dina Pelletier is not safe. And this morning, as we speak, there is a meeting going on between the Commissioner for Health and Human Services, Polanowitz, and Reverend Mahoney, from Liberty Counsel, who has been an incredible advocate for Justina. It's just, my hat's off. I mean, I just get chills when I think of Reverend Mahoney standing with a loudspeaker in front of the State House and talking to the governor and push. It's inspiring. But Justina is far from safe, and coming up on May 24th is going to be her 16th birthday.
I know.
And that's going to be a very big day, and I hope that your listeners will get involved. We're doing this together, America. The media is not helping. Well, Ken, you are media, and you are helping us. And Glenn Beck, and I have to tell you that I'm a Democrat, and so for me to find myself, cheering for Glenn Beck was something that I didn't expect. But Mike Huckabee,
This is not political at all. What's happening here? This is criminal. This has nothing to do with left or right, Democrat, Republican. This is American brothers and sisters being tortured by the American Psychiatric Association and the government. Period. That's what this is about. This is, and you're right. Whether you're a Democrat or not. Now, Nancy, I've got a couple callers on the line. Would it be all right if they ask you a question?
Be my pleasure.
Okay, great. Now, I have no way of telling who you are on here. Your name doesn't come up, so I'm going to read the last four numbers of your phone number, and then you're going to be on. So the first one is 4168. 4168. You are on with the captain. Do you have a question for Nancy?